Hi, my name is Steve Faulkner. Welcome to Real Magic Review and welcome to a Real Magic interview with John Archer. So before we do that, can you please like, subscribe and check out cardmagiccourse.com. That is my online extensive library of card tutorials that is growing every month. We also have live sessions nearly every week and we have a lovely community, just a really supportive community of magicians of any level. So check out that. Any questions, let me know. Huge thanks to John for this. I'm not going to do loads of talking now. This is so fascinating for me. These interviews are just becoming something really special. They're long, so do watch both halves. There's some real gold in here. It's all real gold. John talks about his time on the first ever Penn and Teller Foolers, Britain's Got Talent, and of course touring with Tim Vine and his own tour and the challenges of lockdown. Here's my interview with John Archer. There you go. There we go.
Okay. There we go.
The mic's kicked in, mate.
Ever the professional.
I know. I don't think I've ever started anything on Zoom at any point without having to go through this nonsense. Because as
you know what? I should have done this on my iPad because I got an iPad Pro and the camera's a lot better. But
well, you can do it. If you want to go on that, you can do. We're not in a rush, mate. So
well, all right. I'll tell you what. Let's do that. I'll come back in.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Cancel that idea. I'm back here.
That's brilliant. All that.
Oh, well, it seemed like a good idea to go on my iPad, and then the Zoom wasn't. Well, the Zoom wasn't updated. Then he updated the Zoom, and I noticed I got 6% of battery, and then I couldn't find my charger, which is upstairs. So I thought, I'll forget it. So,
Yeah.
so you got me here with a slightly.
It's fine. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah. No, and then I realised actually a slightly fuzzy image of me is the better version of me. So here I am.
This is what worries me about Zoom shows and stuff, because I don't think I've done anything yet. I did a thing last night that was a session with some people, and it's something inevitably every single time just beforehand, there'll be a battery problem, something isn't charged, and this is, if I'm getting paid a hefty amount of money to do a corporate Zoom show, it's always going to start with a shambles, and I don't like the idea of it.
Yeah, we were chatting in a group chat with Nick Einhorn a few days ago, and suddenly his mic wasn't working, and it's the panic on his face trying to sort it out. He had a Zoom thing the next day. And he was like, "Can you hear me now?" No, you're still a bit quiet. Oh, what am I going to do? Just an extra worry, Not only do you have to know where your thumb tip is, you have to worry about whether your Zoom mic's working.
I know. I struggle putting a double backer on a deck or something like that. And someone like Nick is very, he's very kind of together, isn't he?
He knows what he's doing, yeah.
Yeah, whereas I think if I got into some sort of trouble, it kind of just fits in. But it's with some people, it's an interesting time. But how are you anyway?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm not doing much, obviously, but I'm sort of happy. Sort of getting a bit frustrated, thinking how long is it going to be? You keep getting those little emails of cancellations, which you knew were going to happen. You're going, well, that'll get cancelled, but I haven't heard from them yet. And then eventually it does come through. And then those other ones where it's like you've rescheduled and they go, do you know what? We're going to put it back even a bit more. So it's just everything really got pushed back to next year. It seems now.
Yeah.
I've still got things in the diary for the end of this year, but whether they'll happen or not, I don't know. It's a mystery, isn't it?
It is a mystery.
Yeah.
And we talked a lot about, everybody's talking about it, but I think it's important that we do. And for someone like you, just for those, well, if there's anybody that doesn't know, but you've got your work where you tour with Tim Vine, which has kind of been just kind of observing that over the years has been going on a long time. It's kind of is your bread and butter a lot of the time. And obviously
that's sort of every other year really, but yeah, that's been happening for about 14 years. So, I mean that, but, we have a tour. Well, we had a tour that would have started sort of in about May time this year. And that's been put off, and it was put off to the end of the year, but then some of those dates are now moving into next year. So there's like dates for the end of the year, and then there's other dates for later on in the year, but sort of if they don't happen. So there's dates all over the place. I look really busy in the diary, but it's because most of the gigs have about 7 different dates in for them. But yeah, it is just it's just madness, isn't it? And we seem to be like, everybody else is getting back to normal. It's like nothing's really changing that much for us.
No, and it's. I was listening to, I think it was the Adam Buxton podcast yesterday about stand up and the things you. I mean, people like us consider, but what things people don't consider, like the venues, people trying to run venues, and if they get in trouble, then where do we perform, even when we can perform again?
Yeah, well, I do reckon quite a few of the smaller comedy clubs will end up closing. So, and some of the bigger ones as well. In some ways, it's harder on the bigger ones. They've got so many more overheads that, you know, whereas some of the smaller ones that are just run by a bloke in a pub, but you can just think, well, I'll carry on with my day job, and when everything comes back, I can just open the pub up again, you know, rent the room again and put the club back on. But yeah, it is. I mean, it's going to hit stuff, isn't it? It's going to affect things, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that it's the. I think it was Richard Herring was talking about the fact that you've got and I think it's for magicians as well. It's not necessarily the venues closing down, but it's the people that aren't touring, the sort of jobbing stand-ups that do their 3 or 4 gigs a week just to get by, and they've been doing that for 20, 30 years, which is kind of a massive percentage of the comedy population sort of thing. And they're the ones that are really struggling because they're kind of living on that day-to-day, which is kind of what I think I kind of am at with gigs. I mean, I've never been one of those people that have had all the, you know, like you had the tours. I didn't have any of that. I was kind of going month to month.
But to be honest, I mean, the tours, realistically were, maybe 30 gigs a year.
Right.
Maybe a bit more if we did a second run or something. But I was, my life is pretty much the same. It's just, sorry, my wife must be printing something behind me. But my life is pretty much the same. It's just, gig to gig, really,
Yeah.
Living from that. So, hopefully they'll all come back. I mean, I think there will be sort of a hunger for live entertainment once it's available again. I think there'll be a lot of people who, in the same way that the pubs are open, great, let's all go to the pub.
Yeah.
Cinemas are open, let's all go to the cinema. I think when people can go and see a live show, then I think there will be once it's like, it's okay and it's safe to do and you've got to do it like this, I think people will rush back. I don't think people are, there was a little bit of thought when it first started of, it'll never be the same. People won't want to be out in public again. I don't think there will be that fear. And people disagree with me on it. I've talked to some people about it, and people think, people will never feel the same in groups. I don't think that's the case. I think we're quite robust, and once we know things are okay to do, we sort of get out and do them. So I think it will come back. I think it'll bounce back quite strong. It's just when it'll bounce back.
Yeah, I agree, and it depends on your audience, I suppose, doesn't it? Because if your audience is a kind of, I suppose, middle class, very kind of conscientious, like they're the worried, like the people, or is your audience the kind of contingent that are a bit more free and kind of going for it, and there's not one that's better than the other, but there's a lot of things to think about. And I think we've got a kind of, I suppose, the idea of doing a parlor show to a small audience I've seen a few videos of people on Facebook of people magicians doing paid shows in people's houses where they're kind of 2 meters from someone and there's 6 people, and they're lovely shows to do, they're different. It's not a big buzz, but it's something that is a possibility, I think, for a lot of us.
Yeah. It doesn't thrill me particularly, but
no,
but there again, there's lots of things that don't thrill me. That doesn't mean, I don't like close-up magic. I don't, I've done it in the past, but I haven't done any close-up walk-around gigs for, I would think maybe about 10 years since I last did a proper close-up gig. And, I didn't really enjoy them, but I don't miss them. But so some people who love them, we're all different, aren't we? And you can't, one man's meat is another man poised, all of that. You can't criticize people for doing something if it works for them.
Well, no, you were on that Magic Circle thing the other day, right? And
yeah.
For a bit, and I was saying that about close up, and I'm at a point now where I kind of be happy if I didn't do another 20 table close-up gig, and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that was almost taken as you don't like magic anymore. It's like, actually no, it's actually because I do like magic. It's, you know, I don't think anything's meant to be performed 30 times in a night, whether it's a song, a piece, anything. So
The thing about it is, um, it is work. Doing a close-up gig is a job.
yeah,
It feels like work. Getting up on the stage and having everybody laugh and cheer and shout for you, you know, that doesn't feel like work. That,
no,
you know, that feels much more like, it feels more like showbiz to me.
yeah,
Close-up magic never ever felt like showbiz. I never walked into a close-up gig and thought, you know, I'm a celebrity. Whereas in a silly sort of way, you know, you do a tour show and people pay to come and see you, and you feel a little bit like you've got worth.
yeah,
And sometimes with close-up gigs, and again, I'm not. Some people love them, and there's nothing wrong with them. They're a good outlet for performing magic, and they serve a great purpose, and they earn money and everything else. They're all great, but sometimes you can feel a little bit like you're just, you know, you're just one of the team of chefs and waiters and staff that are there to, you know, to make an event work. It's a job.
yeah.
And so long as you accept that, that's fine. But I think when you've done it for a long time, you speak to most people who've done it for a long time, and they'll have lost that initial joy of,
Yeah.
you know, that first time you go out and you have a table cheering for you. And there's a little bit of showbiz about that, I suppose. But, you know, once you've experienced it 1,000 times, and, you know, you've also had the moments where you walk up and they're not interested in you, or there's, you know, party poppers going off, and there's a million other distractions, which happen at some of the gigs. It's easy to sort of lose the love for it, really.
Yeah, you remind me of, I did a quite a good sort of example of that. Is that every year I host an award ceremony in Sheffield, the Exposed Awards. I put a thing on Facebook. There's one year where I did a trick that absolutely died on its ass, but it's an award ceremony. It's a tough audience. It's all the event organisers of Sheffield, but there's a kind of challenge to it that I like, and I do it every year. And for the first couple of years, they asked me to do that and then do close-up at the after party. And I was like, yeah, because if you wanted the gig. And I thought, great, all the event organisers. And it was so unpleasant. And it's the only time I've ever had to say, and I kind of know him, so it was easy. I had to say to the guy that organised it, I said, look, I just can't do that anymore.
Yeah,
Not because I didn't do close-up, because what I realised is that the status, the difference between the status in the same evening was too great that it kind of weirded people out, and it didn't work for me. So for the first half of the evening, I was on stage having to be very confident to kind of overcome the challenges. It's a bit like a street show, you know, people shouting, people heckling, having to do that.
yeah.
And having to be a little bit cutting, to then going up to people and say, excuse me, and kind of interrupting them. And
It's a bit like having Tom Cruise give out the awards, and then at the end of the awards, the MD says, "And Tom will now be wandering around the tables, giving you a selection of wine and cheeses." Yeah, it's just, you know, it's like that, isn't it? It's like, oh, Tom Cruise is going to give us some wine and cheese. That's nice. You know, you can just imagine doing that.
I know.
I mean, sometimes the other way around works a little bit, but even that can be hard, because you set your status a bit low and then you've got to raise it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it all depends. If you do your close up and you have a stormer at every table and they all love you, then getting up and doing stage afterwards is easy. You know,
I love it. Yeah, that's a totally different.
Great when that works. But if you have the situation where you're trying to do close up and it's, you know, it's those sort of, you know, 20-something businessmen who are, you know, they've got two girls on the table and they really don't care about you.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you get up, you know, the odds are really against you. So, you know, it all depends on the environment, the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think it correlates to a love for magic as well. I think a lot of people are talking, when you talk about that, you know, because like you said, a lot of people do say that, you're doing close-up gigs, and it's nothing to do with falling out of love with magic. It's to do with actually wanting to reconnect with what got you into magic in the first place.
If anything, it's sort of, you love magic so much that you just sort of think, you know, I don't want to bastardize myself.
Yeah.
Doing, and the truth is as well, it's much harder. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's much harder to be creative doing a table hopping close-up set, because we all know that there are a huge amount of effects and routines that you just cannot do in those situations.
No.
You can't do, your great, 4-ace assembly. Like, people end up doing the same tricks. We all know they end up doing ambitious card, omni deck, professors, crazy man's handcuffs. There's all these things, flash cash. There's all these tricks that are quick, they're strong, and they work in people's hands or whatever. There's certain criteria that will work in an environment. And when you first start, you don't. When you first start, you have all your favorite little tricks, and then you realize that's taking too long. They're not listening enough to get what's happening, and slowly you lose them all, and we all end up with the same ones. I say I don't do it anymore, but everybody ends up with the same ones. Not because they're copying each other really, but just everybody comes to the same conclusion. Everybody realizes that's good, that's good, that's good. And sometimes people take the shortcut and just watch what other close-up magicians are doing after 20 years and go, all right, that's what I should do. That's probably the smartest way to get there. But if you don't do that, you'll still end up doing pretty much the same tricks. I mean, bottle through tables, and people realize how great that is. The table. There's certain things that you just know are good. They make sense in that environment.
And you get that thing, don't you? And I mean, look at this amount of stuff I've reviewed over 2 years, and part of the motivation to do it was to make myself learn new stuff and get more knowledge and all that kind of thing as a hobbyist, really, but also to put new stuff in the routines to stop myself getting bored. And when I go out now, well, not now, but I've probably tried most things I reviewed out on a close-up gig. Most of them work to a level that they get reactions. People think they don't know how they're done.
Yeah.
But the practicality of most of them need a bit of scripting. They take too much time. And there's probably 2 or 3 things out of the 200 things I've reviewed or whatever that have stayed in there. And that's through my own stubbornness, really, not because, like you say, if you can put a bottle through a table or make a hole jump from one corner of a card to the other, both of them equally as baffling, but, one of them's going to get the whole table going and one isn't. So you get in that trap of kind of constantly having to kind of
because true, the true small close-up. I mean, I've seen people do it, and it can be done really well. But cigarette through coin. A lot of time when people are 6 feet away and at a slight angle, they can't quite see what's going on, and you've lost them. Bottle through table. Like you say, the whole table are going to be watching. They know exactly. It's usually something that's real to them, which I suppose cigarette through coin is. But I mean, cigarettes are out now. But it's just finding that out, isn't it? And because of that, getting back to the point is, you can only do those tricks. So that's why you sort of get a bit bored with it. You sort of think, I really want to do things. The nice thing about doing cabaret stand-up stuff, which is what I do 99% of the time, is you can pretty much do what you decide you want to do. The limits are only by what limits you decide to put on yourself. You might decide, I don't want to, I don't particularly do anything with liquids just because I don't want to be faffing about with liquids at gigs. If I found a trick that, really, really, really excited me, I might change that rule. But by and large, you can do what you like. You can do routines that are 20 minutes long if they're fun and entertaining. You can do something that's, 60 seconds. You can get a camera and do a closer to the scope to, just be creative with. I say that I've been doing a lot of the same tricks for ages, so I'm probably a bad one to talk about it. But you have got that scope to be creative and do your own thing.
Do you find that create? Because I always thought about this. Because when I was street performing, I did a hack show. I did the thing of doing the show that worked. It was 96. I had no creativity really. But then over time, I found that for me, the creativity came from the improvising around the trick. So I was doing the straight jacket and the juggling thing, but it was the thing in the audience. And when I see you work, that's the kind of fuel that seems to run. I don't mean complete improvisation, but it's the rapport with the audience is why people love your show. Yes, the gags are great, the tricks are brilliant.
Yeah, but to be honest, my tricks are, I would say 80% of them are pretty standard type effects: tossed out deck, magic square, book test. Yeah. So, but yeah, the route, the way I do them and the lines that I use are all original to me, or pretty much.
Yep.
Again, about 80-90% original to me. I've got a few standard lines in there, but yeah, for me, it was discovering that, working with the audience and talking with the audience works for me. You've got to find out what works for you. I think a lot of it looks more ad lib than it actually is. There's a lot of lines that, if you come and watch me a lot, you'll realise that, ad libs happened at the same place at the same time quite a lot.
Yeah.
But it's that giving it a feel for the audience that it's fresh and new.
Yeah.
I mean, that's always important, I think, that the audience feel like they're getting something. And the audience know when they've got a genuine moment. If you get, I had a moment where I got two people up to help me with a blindfold routine. I normally get a boyfriend, girlfriend, or husband and wife. And he was a shepherd and she was a family planning. No, she wasn't a family planner. She was a sex therapist. So obviously just having this, and he was like dreadlocks and hippie sort of clothes. And he did all this sort of a genuine shepherd, and she being a sex therapist, it was just the playing them off against each other was great. And in that routine that night, my wife's coming in. Do you want a piece of paper out of the printer?
No, sorry, I'm just going down to.
All right, you've interrupted nothing. I'm just broadcasting to the world right now. There's about 8
That's all right.
watching you.
It's not live, but I won't edit it out anyway.
You go to the shops.
Yeah.
My wife's going to the shops. See you later, darling.
Yeah.
Hello.
Bye.
I can't remember her name. I just call her the wife. It's an northern thing.
That's right. Like I said, it is recorded, but I ain't going to edit it.
Yeah, no, don't. Leave it in.
Yeah.
She'll be over the moon. She never gets a mention.
Yeah.
So those moments when that type of thing happens, and you get a shepherd and a sex therapist up, that routine lasted probably 15 minutes longer than it normally does, just because we had so much fun talking to him about shepherding and whether she could help him with the sheep if they weren't breeding, and just all this craziness happened, and me chatting to her and ignoring him and various stuff. And the audience know when that's real. It's obvious it's real. It's
absolutely.
You don't get those people. And I always try and create or manufacture or push to get some moments like that in every performance. So you don't need many. If you can get just a couple of times where you go off piste, and suddenly you're playing with something. A couple of times like that can make it feel for the audience like the whole thing was just for them. And I love it as well if I can find something really early on that connects me with somebody very specifically about something, and then that can become a bit of a running callback type theme throughout the show, because then people feel like people often come up to the show. We were in the show where that postman had the terrible shirt. And, of course, to me it means nothing, but to them that was the show. That was the thing they remember out of the show, is that there was a postman with a terrible shirt. And people, I'm sure, will talk about. I was at the show where he got up the sex therapist and the shepherd.
Yeah.
So if you can try and just create a few moments that feel fresh and just make a bigger thing of them, it makes the whole thing seem original, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I think, for people who don't know, you've done. I do a show locally, and you've done mine. You did my first one.
Yeah. I love that show. When are they starting again? I want to be on the bill.
As soon as possible. Yeah, you will be. I'll ask you. Yeah, you'll do it now, because I'll be able to get you again.
Well, so long as I'm available, fella. There's caveats.
Yeah, there'll be a few now.
Yeah. Diary permitting.
But that's what people talk about a lot. And you've done it 3 times now, and we did the one in Blackpool, and it's different every time. And that it's really interesting when you talk about that thing of going with a moment. And I'm only saying that because that's what, as a street performer, you would search for. That's what you're always searching for, that thing, for the person who walks in that looks a bit drunk, or something happening. Not that's going to completely derail the thing. There's a fine line, but that's something you can work with. And when did that? Because that's what you do very, very well, and with the kind of written stuff that feels improvised, that conversational kind of, we're with you as a human being as well as a performer.
Yeah.
And when did you realise that was what you could do. For me, it was the street where it started happening, and I realized I could play with that, and that was kind of my thing of having the structure and looking for those moments. But when did you go from being the, I think you put something on Facebook recently, which was hilarious, which was an old bit of footage of you doing like your act.
All right,
and then,
the IBM competition thing.
Yeah. Which is always great to see.
What's that? I mean, I used to do a lot of prop gags then. And there's lots of, because Tommy Cooper was a big influence, obviously, for lots of comedy magicians. He was. So I and they were a little bit, they were a bit of a comfort blanket for me.
Yeah.
So what I used to do is I'd have all these props, like, I made a name for myself, which was Archer, written in wooden blocks, and a carrier pigeon with plastic pigeon with a handle on it.
Yeah.
All these little things on the table. And for me, they were there a little bit as a comfort blanket that I could always just grab something if I wasn't sure what was happening. If I wasn't sure what I was doing next, sometimes you need a bit of thinking time on stage. Mm-hmm. One thing's happening, you go, how do I start this? Sometimes you just have to think about what you're going to do. And having those, I could pick them up and do them. A little bit like, catchphrases for comedians. Comedians often have a catchphrase, and it just gives them a little bit of breathing space,
Yeah.
So they might say the catchphrase is, "It's the way I tell them," which is the old what's his name gag. It just gives you a little bit of breathing space to collect yourself before you do your next thing. So they were always there as comfort blankets. And it was Noel Britton, really, who I should blame for this. And I often do blame Noel. Noel said he didn't think I needed the prop gags. And I think he thought many things, some of which he was probably too polite to tell me. He probably thought they felt a bit old-fashioned. He probably thought they weren't that funny. I don't know. But he did say to me, I'm not sure about the prop gags. I don't think you need them. And I thought, well, if I get rid of them, what do I replace them with? And I didn't really want to be. I knew Tim at the time, and Tim was doing lots of one-liners, which is sort of the type of gags I would like. I didn't really want to drop them and start doing one-liner gags and feel a little bit like I was copying my mate. So I wanted to avoid that. And I'd realised that, I'd always had this thing where I'd talk to a guy in the front row, and I thought, what I need to do is just come up with more moments where I just chat to people. So I tried to leave moments in routines. I'd think about a routine. I'd write a routine. I wouldn't write it physically, type it down, but a routine would get written in my head through performance until I knew what it was. But I'd always make sure there were moments in that routine where I gave myself a jumping off point to chat to somebody about something else. And of course, a lot of times that is, where do you come from? What do you do for a living? Those are the standard questions, just questions that get to know stuff about people. And it sounds cliched, but the reason they're questions that most comics do are because they're the questions that work the best. It's a bit like Omnideck and Ambitious Card. There are certain questions and things that are going to garner good responses that you can work with. But I also tried to come up with other areas that I could go off on. So most of my routines now have jumping off points. And when I first started doing it, I might jump off and for a line, and it might get nothing, and then I could just jump back in. So having a route that you're taking gives you that safety net. If you go, so what do you do for a living? I go, I work for the government. You go, all right, and you can't think of anything funny to say, and he's a bit dull, and you go, wonderful. Well, here's what I want you to do, and then you're back in the routine. Whereas if they say I'm a shepherd, you go, what? You're a shepherd? What have you got? One of those sticks with a hoop on the top?
Yeah.
How many sheep have you got? Do you count them at night? And you just and they might say something that's funny, and you repeat it, and I wonder what the smell was. This is loads of stuff that can then come from that, and so you stay off script for a while, and then you come back on, and then of course you're constantly adjusting, your timing, because it's always when you have a type of act that is going off piece, your timing is difficult. And in the early days, I did, have a bit of a reputation for overrunning. I think I'm better now, but just that thing of, well, I've spent 3 minutes there, so now I've got to pace this next bit up to pull the routine back in, or look at my table and go, that was great, I had a great time there, I'm going to cut that trick. Or you see something funny, you go, I'm gonna keep this going longer, and I'll lose something, or I won't chat to them about what they do. If they've got 2 people up, the next person you might not. So it's just a little bit. But the nice thing about that is it keeps it fresh for the performer as well. Because we all know if you're doing exactly the same act, word for word, night after night, just like the close-up gigs, it can get hard work. I did a tour. It sounds a bit blasé, a bit posh, but I did a tour in America just before Christmas. It just happened to be in America, but I can't help that. But that was hosting a circus type show, Cirque du Soleil thing, and I had spots where I came on and did my bit, but I really had to keep it tight. They were like, the maximum amount of time I was out there was 10 minutes at one point, but a lot of the times I was out there for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3, 4. So it was. I'm just showing you that I can count now, aren't I? 5, 6. So thank you. So that sort of, by the end of it, it was feeling a little bit, like it was the same every night to me, because there were only a few moments where there was a moment where I got a little kid out of the audience and made a balloon for them, and I'd chat to them. And there was little moments where, that I'd ask them about their parents or who'd brought them, and it would sometimes go somewhere, or the kids would just say things about, stuff that was funny. But the vast majority of it was the same. So if you can have moments in your act where you break away from that, it certainly makes everything much more sort of bearable.
Yeah, and it reminds me, did you ever do the stand-up circuit? Did you ever do... not straight stand up, but do the comedy club.
I've done comedy clubs, and I still do them, but I don't do them very often for lots of reasons. I've been there. One of the reasons is I'm 250 miles north of London, so there's comedy clubs in Newcastle I could do, and there's a couple in Middlesbrough near where I live. But really, if you want to make a name for yourself on the circuit, you need to be down in London, and it just wasn't practical for me to get down there. And the other thing, financially, I've got a mortgage and bills and, everything else. And, it's, for young kids, it's great. If you're, 20-something and don't have a lot of responsibilities or bills, doing the comedy circuit in London is fine. Sleep on somebody's sofa, do a few gigs a night and make some money, and you haven't got a lot to pay for. But I was paying for a mortgage and everything else, and I just couldn't earn enough doing the comedy clubs, really, unless if I'd lived in London and I could do them, 3 nights a week and double up, triple up, then you can start making a living. But it's not easy. But I do them now and again. I love doing them because I find them such great audiences, really. I mean, there. That early, when the comedy club circuit first started, and there was that air of heckling, and it was a bit, the gladiator walking into the lion's den. That's sort of gone from most clubs. There aren't many clubs. I mean, I did Up the Creek, and everybody had warned me about.
I was just about to mention Up the Creek.
Yeah, and I had a great time. So I've done a few, and I like doing them, and I do them when I can. But literally, it's probably half a dozen a year at the moment.
Yeah.
So
That's weird you mentioned Up the Creek, because actually part of the motivation for me asking the question was when you were talking about that idea of having that tight time. Because I did it for about a year on and off in London. I was living in London. And even though I didn't have kids then, I was kind of just about to. And I was at an age where I kind of didn't want to be out every Friday, Saturday night.
Yeah.
And I realised that if I wanted to pursue it, it was going to be every Friday, Saturday night, one gig to the other, doing that thing. And I was still doing open spots, but I did Up the Creek, and I was sometimes putting a little bit of juggling in it. I had this kind of ironic juggling routine, a bit, and it always stormed because it was different. And
Was that when Malcolm Hardy was there?
well, yeah. So I was starting to do all right. But I hadn't done. I used to do this. There was a club in where was it? A guy called Tristan. I don't know if you know. He used to run a couple of clubs in pubs. Really funny guy, and he used to let me do what I want. He used to go, do 10 minutes if you want, whatever. And so I could play and do all that. And then I hadn't done like a spot, a 5 minute. I hadn't done a 5 for like, I don't know, 6 months. And I went to do Up the Creek, and I heard about it. And for those who don't know, Up the Creek was a famous heckling. Like people used to go at just to heckle I'm very good hecklers, you know, all this kind of stuff. But Malcolm Hart, I went on and straight away just died. Just didn't hit, no rapport. Couldn't deal with the first heckle. I was knackered, whatever. But what was really interesting is that everybody that night died. It was an open spot night. Nobody did a good one. And Malcolm was quite cutting about everybody that came on. And the big lesson for me was that I died on my arse, but I never got arsey about it. I never got, you know, that kickback you get sometimes when you die and you start getting a bit kind of chippy.
Yeah.
And I just kind of went, look, I'm really, thanks a lot. Tried a few jokes, didn't work. Have a great night, And I just walked off. But he came up after my bit and said, you know, give him a massive round of applause, that Steve Ford. And, you know, it's not working for him tonight. And the difference, and it taught that kind of humility of, even if you're not having a good show, don't get into that kind of, you know, that blame being the offset of discomfort. When you discomfort, you want to blame the audience or blame the props.
Yeah.
And just to accept it. It was a really, and I saw him and then watched the rest of it. He's just great to watch, wasn't he? He was just brilliant.
He wasn't, when I did it, he wasn't performing. It was Jojo was compere and Ricky Grover was on, I think. It was quite good. But I had a mate who persuaded Malcolm to let me perform, and so he let me do 20 there. So I was doing 20, and I did a 20 minutes and kept it tight, and it went really, really well. I was pleased. You know, and I mean, the audience everybody went well. So it's like you say, you know, you sometimes get nights where everybody goes badly or everybody goes well. So once the audience decided, it sort of just carries on from act to act sometimes. Unless it's a big name. This is a big name on, they'll change their mind. But But I went really well, and this guy who'd managed to get me a performance was there with me. He wasn't my agent or anything, but he was trying to get me a few gigs. And he said, "What do you think, Malcolm?" And he went, "Yeah. He's very, very funny, but he's a bit mainstream, isn't he?" And I mean, to be honest, I think he meant it as an insult, but for me, that was just like, well, yeah. I have no interest to be niche or different. You know, mainstream was a bit of a compliment. I thought, well, he said I went well, and he thought I was mainstream. I thought, I might put that on my website. You know, he went well. A bit mainstream, but he went well. Malcolm Hardy.
That's a great quote. That's a brilliant quote.
Yeah.
Right, so I just wanted to talk briefly, and I know I don't want to keep you. I don't know if you're busy.
Until January for us, so you talk away.
That's the only reason you're here. It's brilliant. This. I just email people and they go, "Yeah, I'll come on, great."
It's give me time to charge up my iPad. That's what it is. We're nearly there. It's charging up.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to just, there's a couple of questions, because I very lazily, just literally 20 minutes beforehand, I've never done it before.
Sorry.
Well, I put a thing on Facebook saying about questions for John Archer, and what people tend to be interested in, and I am, is the sort of creative process, the sort of nitty gritty of it. So, because no quarter, who was the first man to fool Penn and Teller?
John Archer. Yeah.
I know, that was great, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
You must have talked about that so much. But again, for those people that don't know,
Alan Hudson always likes to claim that he was the first one.
Why? Because he did the part. Did he?
He did it. He did a trick in rehearsals, and
that was right.
Yeah. You know, but I mean, you know, we've all done tricks in rehearsals. I mean, there's millions of people who fool Penn and Teller, haven't there? You know. Before then, so I'm not letting Alan have the claim. He can.
You did the posh one though. You did the one where you kind of went out there because it was the first one, wasn't it? And they kind of wined and dined you, and then didn't I hear that? Didn't I hear that later on? If you went out to Vegas, it was like this. I don't know if it's true or not, but they stuck you in some ropey hotel and sort of forgot about you for 2 days.
I don't think it was quite that bad, but
no, I'm exaggerating.
It was me and Ben Earl who went out originally. And we were obviously the first two who'd filled them in that special. And then they knew they were making a series, so they said, right, we've got to film these two in Vegas as part of the opening things as a surprise. So we got to take our, I got to take my wife out, and Ben got to take Kat out, his wife now, she was his girlfriend then. And we went out there for a week, and we got a helicopter ride. They had a stretch limo, champagne. They hired a 1957 Chevy for us to drive around. Yeah, we had cocktails in different bars who were filming us, and it was fantastic. But then everybody else after that in the series of films basically ended up going out there. And, fair play to them. I mean, they didn't stay that you'd get a week out there, all expenses paid with everybody. The trip was, the prize was you go out there and perform for Penn and Teller. So from then on, it was you arrive, you do your show, you come back the next day, sort of thing, and you come to everybody with you. And so yeah, we were sort of lucky in that respect that we were the first ones to fool them and got that. I mean, now I think the prize now seems a little bit strange, because you go to the Penn and Teller Theatre and you perform a show to fool Penn and Teller, and if you win, your prize is to perform in that theatre again.
Great. So do I have to?
Yeah. So it's actually, I don't know. Does that still happen? Do they still perform in that theatre, or is it just the trophy now? I don't know.
I don't know. I just it's become a whole different thing. I just watch it because I like watching people's genuine magic tricks rather than,
Yeah, you see some great stuff on there, don't you? Some fantastic stuff.
Brilliant. Proper magic tricks, proper close-up magic tricks, and all different sorts.
I'd love to go back on again and try and do something different.
So thanks for that. Like I said, like, subscribe, share if this is your thing, and go now and watch part 2 of my interview with John Archer.